Hello, this is Christopher Sadka, and welcome to a presentation on pair programming, an agile software development technique. In this video presentation, I'm going to explain what pair programming is, why it is used, and explore the benefits and drawbacks that it entails. I will also talk about the results of some studies that examine pair programming and how they relate to topics covered in this presentation. What is pair programming? Pair programming is an agile development technique where two software engineers work together using a single workstation. The pair of programmers includes a driver and a navigator. The driver is the programmer that is seated directly in front of the screen and is in control of the keyboard and mouse. The navigator is present and actively viewing each line of code that the driver writes. Pairing and skill levels. Most development teams include a multitude of differently skilled programmers. The pairing of differently skilled levels can seem obvious, but all three yield different results. Pause and think. Which pairing of skilled levels would you expect to produce the best code? Which pairing would produce the best learning environment? If you chose expert for the best code, you would be correct. But what about the drawbacks? Two expert programmers coding with pair programming might not allow for any difference of perspective. While on the other hand, an expert paired with a novice programmer would allow for the introduction of coding techniques. A novice at first is thought to be of no value, but without an expert present, this pairing would yield better results than a single programmer working alone. Pros to pair programming. The pros to paired programming are numerous. Two programmers working together allows for knowledge to be shared instantaneously. Reviewing is done in real time while two minds work on the same task, allowing the navigator to potentially solve problems that the driver does not realize. This allows for mistakes to be caught immediately and prevents future frustration that is more common when coding alone. Communication is key when it comes to pair programming, and programming out loud with someone to articulate your thinking can be of tremendous value. Cons to pair programming. The most commonly cited con to pair programming is the cost of overhead to have two programmers working on the same task. This is largely true if not considering the quality benefits and improvements to the code that is produced with pair programming. A good partner is always necessary, and not meshing with your navigator or driver in this case will cause an issue. Differing programming practices and ideologies in an extreme way can do more harm than the benefits that pair programming has to offer. Similarly, differing skill levels, while a benefit for the more novice programmer attempting to learn, may seem like a detriment to the more advanced member of the pair. Finally, a lack of alone time to think individually is a major drawback to pair programming. Economics of pair programming. A study was completed by the University of Utah Computer Science Department that found overall pair programming to be beneficial for the added cost. There was found to be a reduction in the general mistakes made by programmers. Better designed and shorter length implemented code was written. Multiple people were able to gain an understanding of the entirety of what was written when coding in pairs. Finally, participants learned to work better and enjoy their work more due to pair programming. The overall cost, while expected to be an additional 100%, was found to only be 15% for the added benefits mentioned. This additional cost is repaid by shorter and less expensive testing, quality assurance, and field support. Take a look at the figures to the right. You can see that for each subsequent program written by the pair, the time it took to complete became closer to what it would have been had only one individual written the program. Lines of code written by a pair also grew closer to the lines written by an individual, while staying below the overall individual's total amount. Code ownership when it comes to pair programming. Since there should always be multiple people with eyes on the code that is written, two or more programmers will always have cognizance over the code base. This in turn allows for collective ownership of the code base and subsequently makes it easier for non-owners or part owners to suggest or make changes since no one individual has authority. This also guarantees a more cohesive code base. Tips to pair programming. Some tips and tricks to implementing pair programming effectively. Combining two modes of thinking and taking advantage of the driver-navigator relationship can prove to be very efficient. The driver, while writing the code, can think tactically and focus on line to line. The navigator has the ability to think outside the box in a strategic way, focusing more on the big picture and the next steps that the driver may need to take. This allows the driver to work on the detailed code and the navigator to think about the general solution. Implementing this dynamic appropriately will improve the quality of the code written by the team. It is also worth mentioning that switching between navigator and driver should occur regularly enough so that a person in one position does not get bored or start to think narrowly at the problem. The ping-pong approach to programming. The ping-pong approach can be a very helpful tool to get started as a pair. This method of programming overlaps with test-driven development. Essentially, as for pair programming, the driver would start by writing a test case, and then the navigator would switch to be the driver and write the code to make that test case pass. Now, the current driver will write a new test case for the other programmer partner to pass. Refactoring can be done by any programmer after all tests are passed. Help can be provided by the current navigator on any solution. This method effectively drives the pair programming technique and guarantees a constant workflow between the two programmers. Things to avoid when pair programming. No one likes a backseat coder. While pair programming, it is inherently going to seem like the navigator is giving you orders. There should be time allowed for the driver to think on their own and contribute to the solution as well. As the navigator, you should avoid situations where you are only giving commands such as type this or press this without the justification or explanation. As the driver, you want to regularly pass the keyboard to the navigator and allow them to do some typing as well. If the navigator thinks you are hogging the keyboard, they may become impatient or think that they are not contributing enough to the code. Finally, pairing for a full day is not advisable as this leaves no time to oneself. This is not sustainable and will most likely lead to exhaustion for each of the programmers. Taking breaks frequently will alleviate this. Rotating after a break is generally a good idea.